This is Ryan Boyd.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize right now for my voice. It's a little raspy. Been yelling too much at the kids. I don't know. I should have listened to Dave's presentation earlier. But
Well,
I'll say a couple words here to get us going here, Jaime. Or Jim. Do you prefer Jim?
here, yes.
Okay, Jim. So I like David said, there's a lot of people of influence that would be on my wall that are in this room today. And I had the good fortune of a Nuffield travel 4 or 5 years ago now that I visited where Jaime was consulting on a ranch in Florida, and it had a huge impact on my Nuffield study and also on how we're farming at home here as of late. So it's a real honor and privilege to be here in front of all of you guys at the MFGA Regen Conference and to connect here and bring Jim up north of the border to share some of his wealth of knowledge. So you might as well go ahead, Jim, and introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about what you're up to and what you're all about.
Sure. I am an agronomy engineer, graduated in 1984. Also have an accountant degree, accountant auxiliary. My English is not so good, but I will do my best. And I have been doing some type of high harvest efficiency grazing for all my life. Bought my first farm in 1990 and immediately started learning that a high stocking rate is determinant of profits. I learned this from an old book from New Zealand called From Grass to Milk by McKinnon. And it made sense, and I did the numbers. I'm very good at Excel spreadsheet, and sure enough, that's what has kept us in the black for the last 30-some years. I had a grass dairy, 320 cows on 300 acres for 28 years, and just recently switched to beef operation. I was trained as a dairy nutritionist by Mark Bader of Free Choice Enterprises in Wisconsin, and have done this worldwide. For a long time, I've been teaching grazing and now adapted genetics and selection guidelines to people around the world in similar environments. In September, I was in Alberta with Galentowis. Maybe some of you know him. And he's doing great on this program there. And I was here in 2013, I think, with Johan Sitzman, or 14, teaching a course also. And since then, I have learned a lot of the grazing, and more importantly, teaching. I didn't know how to teach back then. So our success rate of our students was like 3 to 5%, and now we're getting 60%. That's important, because if not, why waste our time? So that's what I bring now.
Okay, so I think for me, the key points in what you're teaching is the high harvest efficiency, the not necessarily high density, but more often than not, like an ultra high density grazing with a high utilization rate of the forage to increase the stocking rate and thus profitability. So can you dig into that a little bit deeper? Like how can you switch that into profitable, more profit?
Remember, I am an accountant, and my wife is the granddaughter of a great cattleman, and me too. I am the grandson of a great cattleman. So when we started farming with cattle, she asked me immediately, this is a hobby, you're not making any money. And I said, wow, she's right. I'm not making any money for the first 2 years, nothing. Until I learned the high stocking rate determines profits, because then your annual costs are divided with more productive units. So I started increasing stocking rate and finding methods to avoid overgrazing at a very high stocking rate. Overgrazing is when we regraze a plant before it's ready to be regrazed. So I found that finally, thanks to Johan Sitzman from Zimbabwe, Africa, who I invited to Mexico where I'm from, to consult and to teach. So he stayed for a month at my house, and I learned much from him. That was back in 2008. And then we had to move to the US because of Mexico problems. And we've been here in the States for 14 years, learning more. And lately, just devoting all my time to consulting. So what's the main one thing we need to achieve when we are grazing livestock on the land, besides profits? Profits. Short-term profits and long-term profits. Profits for today and profits for tomorrow. And what determines our profits for today and for tomorrow? Long-lived soil organic carbon, or humus. That's the most important thing. And we have been told that it's created by the decomposition of organic matter. Litter, roots dying off, and manure, or crop residues. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's not so. And this has been known since 2012. I learned about it in 2013 or 14. And long-lived soil organic matter, the one we have been mining off our soils for the last hundreds of or thousands of years, is created only with the fat bodies of microbes that are fed fatty root exudates. Have you heard about root exudates? Okay, usually they are sugary in the green season, and they only turn to fatty after plants get over mature and keep growing. And then the root exudates change to fatty. The amount of fat we produce per acre per year determines the amount of long-lived soil organic matter we create per acre per year. That means that under rotational grazing, without stockpiling, we do not create much of this humus, which is our soil's real fertility, and makes your grass grow faster and with higher quality, up to 3 times faster. So that's the number one thing, okay?
So these fatty root exudates that you figure if we leave the plants get more mature than we're used to leaving them, they produce these fatty root exudates, build that soil humus up, the long-lived organic carbon. How do you manage that grazing of the more, we would say, coarse or more mature? How do you find that balance to turn that into profit?
Okay, we have 2 seasons in the year, the green season and the brown season. So in the green season, we want the highest quality forage to get maximum profit, maximum daily gain, maximum winning weight, maximum fertility. And then in the brown season, we want the maximum amount of volume stockpiled to carry a larger number of animals in good body condition through the brown season. So how do we do this? I've been trialing different ways, and the one that fits the best in all the environments around the world is dividing your farm, your grazing operation, in 3 sections, where one section will be grazed in the green season with the focus on animal performance. There will be a second section, the buffer section, that will caution and where you can take your livestock to graze whenever it's a dry year and the first section is not yet ready to be regrazed, and that way we avoid overgrazing. And then the third section which will be stockpiled year long and will be used only after killing frost. That third section will be alternated through the property, so in 3 years you have stockpiled your whole property. Once you do this, the fungi to bacteria ratio will start to change to more fungi. Fungi create humus, bacteria digest humus. So when you do this, you will start to see that your stockpile section gets spongier when you walk on it. And it gets spongier because it's higher in fungi to bacteria. Whenever we have compacted soil, it's very high in bacteria and low in fungi. So we do this alternating because in the brown season, we want a huge volume so it fits correctly. In the green season, we want the highest quality possible with livestock health first. We don't want scours. And then we want maximum daily gain or winning weight. And then we can get good conversion efficiency of the tons of grass we produce to sellable products. Doing the 3 sections, we minimize overgrazing, which alone increases your total grass productivity 3 times the first year, and that's what we're getting.
So you've like 3 times the production. We amp it up, stockpile a third of it, have a third buffer, and then a third of kind of the green stuff. We might come back a little quicker on it while the other stuff is stockpiling. When we get to that stockpile, can you, like, that's something we've been struggling with at home, is to get the protein balance, get the supplementation dialed in. Do you want to talk about that? Like if we're calving in June, calves are still on the cow here right now. The weather's starting to, like, it's cooling off, starting to freeze up. Pasture grasses are drying up a little bit. Educate me on on the supplementation. How do we get that?
Let me start with my slogan, which I coined many years ago. It's fat cows, fat cows, fat cows. Not obese, but in good body condition. That's our first priority. If ever our livestock lose weight, we're going to pay with our unrealized profits. So, whenever your livestock, that it pays to keep the calves on the teat for 7 or 8 months, whenever they lose body condition, we lose money. So number 1, do whatever it takes to not allow that to happen. And that comes from 2 factors, management and genetics. So we work on both. We start working on the genetics with the adaptive genetics and selection guidelines. And in the meantime, we do whatever it takes to not allow those cows to drop in body condition. Whatever it takes. Because if you allow them to drop, they will not be productive. They will fail next year. And we will pay that. So never allow that to happen. And once you start to increase or improve your genetics, then you can go lower in your grazing, because we graze as hard as our genetics allow without losing body condition. And we supplement as needed as our genetics require. You follow me? And we made supplement only with protein right now. And when it gets very cold and the wind chill is terrible, we need to feed some energy also.
Okay. When it comes to genetics, getting the right genetics, what is a realistic timeline to expect supplementation requirements to be reduced or the pasture quality increase so that the genetics, how long, what does it take, how many years to get all this up and running?
I love that question. When you start selecting your bulls differently and start raising your homegrown bulls from your very best cows, which are the ones that have the longest productive longevity and never gave you a problem, then you get epigenetics benefits, and your bulls born in your farm from your best cows will help you to spread those genes into the rest of the herd. The first calf crop will be different when you do that, the very first calf crop.
Okay. And I'll say if excuse me, if questions are popping up here, feel free to head to the mic.
Please feel free to interrupt us at any time, because I don't want to continue until the questions are answered.
Yeah.
So there is a question. Please get the microphone behind you.
How big of a herd do you want before you're saving your own bulls?
Any size, but how big of a herd you need to close the herd and not bring any other genes from outside. It's been proven 120 cows because Tom Lasseter did that for the last 80 years. Started with 120 cows and didn't have a problem because he selected according to nature, which is what I do. I do not go by EPDs. I go by what nature is showing me, and I get much better results. I'm going to be very honest. If some of you don't agree, just tell me, and I will try to explain or shut up.
As far as sticking with that genetic line or that thinking, let's say you start using the high density non-selective grazing.
Oh, by the way, I don't call it that way. No.
If you're using the total grazing program, you're using this program and your carrying capacity, your stocking rate needs to increase. How do you think the best way to grow the herd is? Would you buy animals?
No, because of what I just said, the epigenetics, I prefer to grow from retained heifers. And if you need more mouths to consume all the stockpile forage before spring, because it will hinder the growth points from too much shade, the stockpile, then I will bring someone else's cows to consume it and then return the cows. Have them pay a per monthly fee or something.
Something that struck me when I visited you down in Florida, when we sometimes get our heads wrapped around or get the blinders on and think we have to be grazing at a high density all the time. And one thing we struggled with was trying to graze at a high density during calving, and it was turning into chaos. And then you said, no, during calving, just let them selectively graze or give them a bigger area. I shouldn't say selectively. Give them a bigger area. And since we started doing that the last 3-4 years, it was like we just went back to being magical again, how it was supposed to be. All the calving issues went away.
Yeah, cows need time to bond with their calves, especially first calf heifers. So I prefer to move them only every 2 weeks for the 45-day calving season. Almost all of them calve in the first 30 days. So I just move them, I give a paddock large enough for 2 weeks. And once they finish everything, like a total graze, a high harvest efficiency, non-selective, but over 2 weeks. So that includes some overgrazing because they're regrazing the regrowth, okay? So we need to do that in the spring. And I do it in the buffer section, the second section. And then I just move them to the adjacent paddock where the calves can go under the wire and join the mom. But only after they finish everything, because if not, they will stay behind. Okay, so I only use one wire, polybraid, this high, and then the next 2 weeks to the adjacent paddock. And then I'm finished. And those paddocks that I overgraze in the calving season to favor the bond between the calves and the cow, I stockpile that. So that's why it's the buffer section. That's where I do that. Doing that saves you a lot of grief and makes you more money. Another thing that will save you a lot of money and some danger is to not ear tag your calves at birth. Wait until 2 weeks later or until the calving season finishes, and then you take the whole cow herd to the corral, separate them. I have the video on YouTube, it's free, on the Real World Ranching by Jaime Elizondo channel. And that's how we separate them very fast from the cow. And we ear tag all the baby calves and return them with the cows. Because you're only going to select your best bull calves from your best cows, and you have them identified, your elite group of cows, 10% of your herd, you're going to see to which cows they attach themselves to, and in a few days you know exactly which ones they are. So no need to ear tag at birth, because the cow will release a lot of cortisol, because their protective hormones are very high around calving time, and all the group is very high. They start bellowing when you try to do it. The calf drinks the milk high in cortisol, so he or she also gets frantic, and that's not in our favor, because for the full year they will remember. And once they are close to forgetting it and forgive us, they calf again, and we put the ear tag again. So stop doing that, please. New moms, new cows, new calf cows are the leading cause of farm accidents involving livestock.
Zach, go ahead.
Hi, Jim, you and Ryan have both used the term high harvest efficiency, and I wondered if you could just kind of give us a ballpark number, like how much forage removal are you talking about? And I guess the reason for that question is I know I've seen a graphic, I think it was a research study, they showed it to us when we were in university about, I was kind of stressing don't take too much forage, I think, and it talked about root die-off past, I think it was 70% forage removal. And they talked about how that affects regrowth, and I wondered what your observations have been and how you would comment on that.
I love that question. Let me answer with another question that everybody can answer. Have you seen cows or sheep graze? Do they graze selectively, or do they graze like a machine that you can adjust the height to which they graze? They graze selectively. So the plants that they like the most, they will take down to the ground and leave the less desirable ones untouched or just barely grazed. But when you graze non-selectively with a 90% harvest efficiency, which you don't get even with making hay, then you create a level plane where the plants need to compete against each other, and which one will have the best advantage? The ones with the larger leaves, which will be your higher quality forages, because they can intercept more sunlight. And because you only do this on fully recovered plants that are full of energy reserves, the regrowth will be very vigorous. Why will it be very vigorous? Because green leaves create energy by photosynthesis, while stems consume energy by respiration. So the more stems you leave behind, because cows will consume the leaves, because they are higher in digestibility. So when you do selective grazing, trying to get the 4-inch sward or whatever flavor of the month the guru says, it's impossible, first. Then you will favor the worst species. Then you will leave more stems than leaves, and they will continue to consume the energy reserves in roots and crown. So we want to create strong and fat roots, not thin roots. So by taking it all off, like if you were making hay, you will get a better leaf-to-stem ratio in the regrowth, which will produce more energy to store underground and to feed the soil life with the root exudates. So that's why we do a very high harvest efficiency grazing once we have the right genetics.
I would add to that too. I know I'll never forget the day I was in your office in Florida there, and you pulled up that study that you're referring to, Zach, the one that they teach us at university.
Crider, 1953.
That's right. And if you read that study, because I did, well, Jim brought it up and read through it, and I later went back to it, and I think they did that study. It was a monoculture. I think it was orchard grass, and it was grown in like a growth chamber, like a growth pod.
3-inch pots, new seedlings.
Yeah, and so, and they were talking about frequencies of grazing like every 2 weeks or once a week versus 2 weeks or a month. That was the longest recovery, was like 30 days. So when you does that transfer in real life context, like Jim says, cattle will eat what they like to the ground, but so you put that in a diverse pasture, it's the results in real life are different. But so the thing that I really struggle with, and when I talk to people, telling them like, sometimes we might take as much as 90% utilization. The hair goes up, and what about the litter? We got to have the litter.
Oh, the soil armor.
The armor, yeah. So can you speak to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, first, I made part 1 and part 2 of a masterclass called How Did We Get It So Wrong About the Kreider Experiment. That was a good experiment to prove that overgrazing is bad. Of course, yeah. We don't want to overgraze. He was simulating overgrazing by cutting with scissors potted plants, seedling plants, every 3 days up to every 2 weeks. That's overgrazing in any book. So we don't do that, okay? And now, the question was?
Talking about litter. How do you manage the litter?
Litter is important. No question about it. But too much litter kills seedlings and growth points. I was in Cumbria in the UK last year at Carbon Calving. I was the speaker there, and there were, I don't know, like 300 people. And they say, all that you're saying is fine and nice, but a guy just came from Missouri 2 weeks ago, and he told us the opposite. If you graze only the top 10%, everything will work out. So that's easier than dividing in 3 sections and doing the total grazing. I say, okay, and why is that? Because, I don't know, magically it will work. No, it will not. No, it will. No, it will not. Okay, let's go out and do a pasture walk. Everybody, I took 300 people out with a bullhorn. Everybody, please bend your knee, part the grass, and tell me what color are the growth points? Are they green, yellow, or white? Well, they didn't want to do it. They knew. So they did it, and of course they were dead. They were white from overshading from the tall grass that had been top grazed. And then they started to understand. But sometimes you have to prove it, because a fairy tale is what most people want to hear, even if they know it's not true. That's my conclusion. There is someone from the UK here, maybe she was there. Cumbria, September 2023. And then we went to Amy Farm with sheep near Scotland.
Mr. McRae.
I give Ryan all my tough questions, so Jim, I'll give you an easy one. During the growing season and the green season, what are you using for supplementation if you're taking 90% of the forage available in the calving season over 2 weeks? Are you supplementing to continue to have good animal performance, and especially in calving and breeding seasons?
That's a very good question. That's what I said. We do it on the buffered section on stockpile grass, so you have green and brown together, and the cow will balance the diet, and you don't move them until they finish everything.
So you're saying that if done correctly, that will be a balanced nutrition.
The cow will balance the diet if she has enough brown to consume fiber. Have you seen this in your own situation? You've done it for the last 3 years.
Yeah, I would say the calving season is not an issue. If you we calve in June, and there's so much rapid growth at that time. The nutritional quality of the grass is totally there.
Larry Werner calves in May on stockpile. Is he here?
Yeah, Larry be here.
Larry,
somewhere.
raise your hand.
It's back here.
Okay, you can tell us, do you have scours in your calving cows when you calve in mid-May?
No.
Why?
Enough mature forage that the cows consume.
Because you graze in stockpile.
I think, Craig, I'll let you speak here when I'm going to try and summarize what you're asking.
Thank you.
You're worried about the cattle not getting adequate quality because we're grazing at such low residual or high utilization rate.
Yeah, like I'm wondering if you're adding in supplemental feed, especially in the first, like in the start of this program, when your genetics maybe aren't adapted to it. Are you having to add in supplementation for either energy or protein? And I guess especially in breeding season, I know in our place we've struggled with animal performance during breeding season.
Yeah, not when green. When green at this latitude, we have and cool season grasses, we have high energy, high protein. What's lacking is fiber in the early spring. Then later there is enough fiber. We don't ever want our cows to be, or ewes to be scouring. I have a YouTube video for free that is called How to Stop Scours in Your Livestock that I made in Vermont, which is not too far.
So I think it's critical to understand what Jim is saying when he's talking about splitting the farm in 3 different areas. One area is like a season-long stockpile does not get grazed during the green season. What you're calving on, what you graze early in the season is what you're probably going to be coming back to breed on. So this is not stuff that's all coarse and dead. It's been grazed earlier that season.
Yes. Your section that was stockpiled the full year is where you're going to be grazing in the early spring. And when you finish that section, the regrowth, because of full energy reserves, will be the fastest and most vigorous, and you stay in that section, which now becomes section number 1. Was section number 3 last year, now becomes section number 1. And that's how we alternate and improve the whole property. Even when we do our cash crops, we can improve the long-lived soil organic carbon with a 5-year rotation with cattle, and then do a 3-year rotation with agriculture. And then we can dispense with a lot of the cost that we usually associate with agriculture.
I had a thought there and I just lost it.
It's called Back to the Future.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, back to the utilization thing. I think is critical. And one of the things that we struggled with early is if you're really flirting with danger, utilizing that much, because like a difference of half a day, especially if you're at a high density, if you're a few hours late to move them can really restrict intake, and that's when your performance will crash, even if it is nice green forage. So maybe you want to talk about that a little more.
That's true. In the green season, because you're focusing on livestock performance, daily gain and all that, you may do some overgrazing, you may not leave enough residual, but remember that next year, that whole section will be not grazed. So it will recover root depth and energy reserves, and most importantly, you will get less and less interplant spacings, which means a better solar panel. Because every year that you stockpile, you're going to take it off with as high as harvest efficiency as possible to expose all the seedlings to sunlight. And they will not be grazed again until they are fully established. Unlike rotational grazing, where you come back and they pull the seedlings out with the roots. That's why I devised this. I started with rotational grazing, André Boissan, in 1980. Yeah.
Another question there?
I was wondering if your approach changes for dairy farming, and more specifically, dairy farms that are calving year-round and don't have that break where you can kind of fit in a lower quality nutrition.
Yes, it does change. You see, when you want maximum daily gain, you need to graze like section 1, focusing on animal performance. And I had a graze dairy for 28 years. So let me tell you, long-lived soil organic matter did not increase 1 bit in 28 years because of chasing quality. Grazing in the green season at the best quality produces sugary root exudates, no fat. When no fat, no humus. And we proved this in the Iowa-Minnesota border. 10 years of rotational grazing, up to 10 times a day breaks. And 10 years, the neighbor set stocked. After 10 years, sample again the soil, the same. Didn't improve 1 bit. Now I stopped milking. And I did 2 years of these 3 sections, and the improvement is amazing. What can you do with a grass dairy or a dairy? Well, divide into thirds, and the section that you stockpile use for dry cows. Because even if you calve year-round, you're going to have a group of dry cows. And that's what you use to harvest it. Even if you can only stockpile 1/5, that's better than nothing.
Thanks, Sean.
That's the truth. I mean, I've done it.
Yep. Any more questions? Head on up there.
Okay, I want you all to know that if you can carry, let's say, 100 cows on a given number of hectares, and you, by doing this, you can double the number of cows because you increase grass productivity, not because you made them go hungry, right? We want fat cows. Okay, you increase grass productivity, and now you can carry 200 cows with very little more cost. What would that do to your profits? Well, I'm an accountant, so I did the numbers, and the profits triple. So that's where the money is. And then I have farms that we have increased productivity of grass and stocking rate 8 times, others 5 times, others 3 times, but it's normal to get double stocking rate the first year over rotational grazing, which is already or was already double from set stocking. So when people compare their results with set stocking, they are comparing to the worst of the worst. It's like if you say, I won a 100-meter race against a one-legged guy. It's not fair.
We have another question there, Breggy.
Yeah, what kind of increase in soil organic matter are you seeing on a yearly basis with that system?
I couldn't hear you. Could you please repeat?
The question was, what kind of soil organic matter increases are you seeing on a yearly basis?
Yes. We got in Florida on sandy soil with over 100 degrees for over 100 days per year. We went from 1% organic matter to 3.18 in 5 years. That may not sound like much for here, but it's unheard of in the subtropics. Here it will be much faster. And remember, we don't only want organic matter because organic matter is divided into labial, which lasts a few months or years, and long-lived, which lasts over 100 years. We want the later. That's what creates real soil fertility and makes your grass grow faster every year. When we started there, the grass was ready to be grazed in 60 days, and 5 years later, it was ready to be grazed in 20 days. That's 3 times more speed of growth, plus having more plants per square yard, we produce much more, 5 times more stocking rate, and without hay, while the neighbors feed hay for 5 months of the year. Yeah. Oh, by the way, soil grows upwards, not downwards. Have you noticed that? That's why.
What do you mean by that?
The disappearing rocks of Ireland. They had these boulders that they took pictures 50 years ago, and now they are covered with soil. When carbon credits are measured, they measure downwards, and soil grows upwards. That's wrong. You can see this on the highway.
Interesting, because I always thought as the roots and the organic life moved down, it would turn it black. But
yeah, live roots create dark soil. Have you noticed that? That's because carbon is black. So that sandy soil in Florida is now almost black. But the most important thing is the smell. You need to smell your soil. Does it smell metallic? Does it smell like a glitter of a forest floor? Metallic is very bad. Litter of a forest floor is fungi. So you're smelling fungi. That's very good. So we need to be more in tune with nature because we are part of nature. We are not detached from nature.
Lawrence?
Yeah, so I was wondering, like this year we had really good rains all the time and pastures were looking amazing. Can you cheat a little bit and let's say you don't want to get any more animals in your pasture, can you clip it at a certain height to make some armor and get the grass growing again?
Nitrogen?
No, Lawrence's question was, a year like this where we had good moisture throughout the season, is there opportunity to cheat a little bit and clip some of that grass, or how does that change your strategy if we are having a beneficial growing season to where the productivity is good, it's regrowing
Okay,
fast?
let's now talk about the confined dairy, because I consulted for 20 years for confined dairies up to 3,000 cows, 3,600 cows. And my record is increasing profits 100%, that's the record on average, by increasing longevity and lowering daily costs and lowering vet costs, decreasing milk urea nitrogen and increasing productivity a little. There is a very important thing. Legumes exude more fat than grasses. So if you can produce a more legume-based forest that you can cut and make into haylage or hay, you will improve your soil better than if it's only grasses. Then the slurry of the confined cows, if you compost it, then it will improve your soil. But if you apply it raw or without good composting, it will act the same as synthetic fertilizer and pollute and create a problem. And draw insect pests. Insect pests cannot digest high bricks forage because they have a simple digestive system, but they can digest synthetic fertilizer forage.
So you're not opposed to making hay on like an alfalfa grass-based hay?
Not at all. I'm not opposed to making hay. I'm not opposed to fire if you use it in low intensity, infrequently. And hay, if you rotate with stockpiling forages or higher, let's say you plant corn and you make silage out of corn. You can improve your soil with corn if you increase photosynthesis activity in that corn plant by making sure you have enough magnesium and iron in it and a good soil biology. Like, for example, if you use vermicompost leachate, I am doing that, and then you will be able to make silage while you improve your soil. But that's only for confined dairies, not for beef producers grazing. It's a different story.
Well, it's an interesting one though, because with our winter that we have here, we could have a month, 2 months where it's 20 below zero with 3 feet of snow. So we do have to produce a winter feed of some kind. And typically, well, right now, like corn silage is one of the most cost-effective means to winter the cow if you can.
Corn stalk is good. Corn silage is not to winter a cow. Corn silage is good for a dairy cow, but you don't want it for a beef cow.
So let's go with that for a minute. What do you think here with that in mind? Our extreme winter. What do you think is the most cost-effective?
Barley straw with high-quality alfalfa hay. That will be the best option, I think, because you need a high fiber that produces heat in the rumen when digested, and you need the protein, which here maybe, or canola meal, whatever it's cheaper per cow per day, but sometimes it's cheaper to feed in the winter the alfalfa hay.
Yeah. Mr. Beeden?
Hi there. You'd mentioned a few minutes ago, when you were talking about doubling your stocking rate, that it was costing you a little bit more on a per acre or per hectare basis. What are you spending more money on than your neighbors?
Oh, I am spending much less money than my neighbors. Especially on a per cow basis. Yeah, go ahead.
Did I understand the question correctly? You suggested you were spending more money per hectare, but doubling your stocking rate?
I am spending less money than they are.
Okay.
And I had doubled the stocking rate. You see, that's the nice thing of when you follow nature, you produce more at a lower cost. For example, my student in Galentowes in Alberta, he made, I think, 110 pounds per acre productivity with stalkers. That's good for a drought year. For them, it was a drought year this year. And they only gained 1.8 pounds per animal, but because of the higher stocking rate, it was 110 pounds per acre in 120 days. So that's a good profit. That's profit. He didn't spend any. And my neighbors, or if you are in this type of country, well, you can increase your stocking rate with stalkers and then you return them in September, end of September, so no winter. Or you can grow your grass all year without grazing it and graze it in the winter after killing frost with other people dry beef cows. That makes much more money and improves your soil faster.
So if you, the fastest way, if you could stockpile the whole farm all growing season, graze it off in the dormant season, you think that would, if soil was your only concern?
I am sure of it. I don't think. I am sure of it. For example, if you want to grow the best crop of agriculture, you stockpile and then some grass or forage or sweet clover. Does sweet clover grow here?
It grows very well.
Very good. Okay, I know that. But I just want, because in Spain they told me, oh, I don't know sweet clover. But the variety I want you to plant is Madrid, Spain. They say, no, we never heard about it. So I had to find it for them. People forget, young people. We need the old timers to tell us and remind us. Okay, so you grow some of that sweet clover a whole year, and you let it full maturity. You get a lot of honeybees and all that. You graze it if you want to after frost, and then you plant your crop there next year. That will be a very high yielding crop because the soil will be spongy.
Another question.
I think he was first.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
That's all right. I took your course about 5 years ago with Jim, so I have two questions on that. We're always learning and growing as time goes on. So have you changed your mind or your thought process or tweaked or modified anything from the course? And my one takeaway from the course that I struggle with is you'd recommended 4 moves a day. We did that for a while, but both my son and I work off the farm and we struggle to do it on a regular basis. What's the advantage of 4 small moves a day versus 1 big move a day where they're total grazing?
I love that question. The rumen digests in batches, and the rumen does 4 to 5 batches per day. A cow or a ewe only ruminates for 8 hours a day and grazes for 8 hours a day and sleeps for an hour and a half. So if you want the best animal performance, it's 4 breaks a day. And you will also get the highest harvest efficiency because the grass will not be soiled with manure and urine with dragging with your hooves. Second best is once a day, but always at the same time of the day, like around 10 a.m. or 12, because of higher energy content at that time. Third best is not every third day or every week, it's every 2 weeks, because of the rumen has 5 different groups of microbes. Each group digests a different part of the plant. Some starches, some fiber, some protein, some fats, some sugars. So to reach a balance between them, they need a constant diet, which we achieve best with 4 breaks a day, second best with once a day, and third best every 2 weeks, because it takes 5 to 7 days for those groups of microbes to be stabilized. So when you move them every week, that's the worst, because the quality and quantity is very high the first day and very low the last day, and it's changing every day. So they cannot adapt. By doing it at least every 2 weeks or every month, then they have the time to adapt and take it all down before you move them to the next break. I know that's very different from what everybody else says, but everybody else are not nutritionists. That's the difference.
And what time of the day are those 4 breaks, or what's the best
I
option?
prefer to start around at this time of the year, 10 a.m., then every 2 hours after that. That means at 12 another, at 2 another, at 4 the last one. And at the last one, the 4th, you evaluate the gut feel on the left flank. And if it's very full, you don't give them the 5th break. If it's not, you better give them the 5th break because you want the highest performance possible. And 5 years ago, I didn't have my courses. Maybe it was 4 years ago. Yeah.
What do you think?
And whenever I change something, I do it, and you have it for life on a digital platform, and it changes worldwide. If I was to write a book, which I did, I took it out of circulation because I am continually learning and evolving. So I need to change some things.
What do you think the biggest shift in your thinking has been since you started the course 4 years ago?
The online platform is the best way to go, and ongoing coaching, personalized coaching, is absolutely needed to avoid the biggest problems, which may cost up to $500,000.
A question?
So I have 3 here right now. Would you like me to ask them all at once, or do I do one at a time, or what would you?
One at a time, please.
Okay, sure. I think it's pretty pertinent here in western landscapes where I think fire risk is pretty high for stockpiled forage, especially given I think there were some pretty bad fires in western North Dakota this year. I was wondering if you had any for like fire mitigation or fire. Not the insurance in the financial product sense, but just kind of like fire insurance type practices or ideas.
Well, what I want to do is by management, minimize the risk. So I do more like a checkerboard pattern where I alternate the stockpile paddocks in strips with the paddocks that are grazed down in the green season. Now, when the green season ends, before going to the stockpile section, the section number 3, I take all the remaining regrowth from section 1 and then section 2, because those are the highest quality paddocks, grass paddocks, and I don't want it to deteriorate over winter. Section 3 is the oldest. It doesn't need to be contiguous. It can be in a checkerboard pattern, and then you mitigate the risk of fire, and you keep the highest quality grass in your livestock.
I guess my next one is that I think that here, at least in the northern climate, at least on our place, it seems like the fed feed costs can kind of get to be out of control pretty fast. There could be a pretty big difference between maybe feeding less than 2 tons of hay per head per year versus 5, 6 plus. I was just wondering if you had any guidelines as to kind of, it's hard to predict going into winter, but if you had any guidelines as to where a producer should try to stay beneath for kind of a fed feed amount, or trying to keep the fed feed costs in check.
Please translate.
So the question is...
My hearing is not very good now, sorry.
And correct me if I'm misinterpreting, but I think the intent of the question is, do you have any recommendations as to how much stored feed somebody should plan for in our northern climate?
Oh yeah, 1 month.
I meant more like not as much, and maybe this is misinterpreting again, but not so much like stockpile, but more like
Hay.
Supplement. Supplement.
Yeah. I want you to have at least 1 more month of hay under roof than you need, because in an emergency that's very valuable. And hay on the roof doesn't deteriorate much. So you can keep it there and use it when needed.
So keep 1 month of feed kind of as an emergency use.
How did I learn this? Because in the Ozarks in Missouri, sometimes they get an ice storm and the cows cannot even walk on the slick ice. So you need to break a path with the tractor and take them to the corral and feed them hay. And if you don't have the hay, you're in bad luck.
Could you give an estimate, Jim, of, okay, so we're gonna feed barley straw during the dead of winter. Dry cow,
With alfalfa.
so how much alfalfa per head per day are you thinking?
Oh, and if they do not maintain body condition because it's too cold, then you need to feed some barley grain also. And that needs to be fed every day or in a self-limited with salt container. How much? Well, maybe 25 pounds of barley straw and another 10 pounds of alfalfa hay, just to be sure.
Yeah, I think that's a
In
very
winter.
tough question because it all depends on the quality, the context, the circumstances very variable, so.
That's per day. Then do you figure out if it's 100 day or 120, always go 1 month beyond what you think. So you have an emergency gap or I don't know how you say it.
Some kind of buffer for sure. And I always say the beautiful part of having your extended period of stockpile, it's very easy. It's much easier to plan like your drought plan because you can have that inventory there. You know, months in advance that you're going to be short on feed. So
Yeah, let's say it's a good year and you only use the 1/3 of your farm and you have 2/3 of stockpile. Well, you know when the green season ends that you need more livestock. On the contrary, it's a drought year and you use 2/3 of your grass and you only have 1/3 left. You know you need to get more straw and hay or take some livestock out or find a leased place. It helps with decisions.
And your third question?
I was just wondering, I can see it like in the total grazing program that adapted genetics and selection is an important part.
Can you go to the next one? How do you change?
I'm not.
Oh.
One of the next slide. Go ahead, continue on with that.
I guess I was just wondering if there was any room for like a custom grazing or just bringing in seasonal yearlings, like maybe from an off-farm place. I was just wondering how that would fit into your program and if you had any thoughts on that sort of enterprise.
Yeah, it fits very well. Let's say you want to keep your stocking rate low with your herd of cows, and you want to bring other people, stockers, to grow out for 4 months of the year. Yeah, that's doable. Or on the contrary, you want to see at the end of the green season how much grass you grew, and then you use it in the winter with dry cows from somebody else. That's even better. So yeah, there are many ways to do it, whatever makes you the most money. That's why we need to do our numbers and find out what makes the best money for today and for tomorrow. When you allow your grass to stockpile the full year and use it in the winter for dry cows, you know that you're producing more long-lived soil organic carbon every year. So that means more profit for today and for tomorrow. So I like that one. But whatever fits your actual needs. Now, what is the main determinant of productivity and profits on a farm or ranch with livestock? It's stocking rate. There is no other. It's not winning weights, it's not price per pound, it's not black color, it's not any of that. It's stocking rate. And I have an Excel spreadsheet for free access on my webpage that you can download and put your own numbers. Next one.
Next slide. Huh? Slide or question? You want another question? Go ahead.
Thanks, Ryan. I have a question regarding the types of alfalfa that you use. Like I had an opportunity to hear Steve Kenyon talk about the way he grazes and manages his farm. And Steve was mentioning it's really important to put a tap-rooted with a shallow-rooted alfalfa to make use of that whole soil profile. Could you comment on that? And also, Steve really likes using 3, 4, or 5 grasses because apparently each grass species gives off a different exudate different times a year, building up soil. And that's something that's a real paradigm shift for us in the seed industry.
Yes, I totally agree with biodiversity, but I want to take it a little further. Silvopasture. I want you all to plant every 20 meters a row of caragana to break the wind, to hold the snow, and to provide fodder and shelter to your livestock and wildlife habitat. You planted with a no-till drill, and I am the pioneer in this. I have my whole farm in fodder trees every 20 meters and creates a haven for wildlife, for people, and for livestock, and you produce 30% more grass per hectare than without the trees, plus the fodder from the trees. So I not only believe in having 5 or 15 species of grasses and another 10 of forbs and another 5 or 10 of legumes. You also need the trees. A savanna is the highest producing ecosystem in the world.
Where do you get your 30% higher production number from?
Under the tree shades, because it's a diffuse shade, the grass grows all the way to the trunk if you do this type of program. If you do it under continuous grazing, I'm waiting for that.
Yep. Go ahead, Jock.
No, I'm waiting for them behind you to finish speaking.
Okay. Are you done there, Paul? You're satisfied?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, or you can share with us so I know what you're talking about.
I'm one of the lucky producers here who raises bison. And since bison have, like cows, 4 stomachs, I've noticed that they too also have cycles during the daytime when they're ruminating and when they're eating. Can you explain how the bison who lived in big wild herds originally, were they subjected to the same 4 hours of breaks in what they fed on? And how often during the daytime would they be stopping to graze, or were they always on the move?
So Jock's question is regarding the bison. So obviously nobody was managing the bison 4 times a day for grazing.
Maybe more, but they were walking and grazing.
So, yeah, so can you elaborate on that? How does that compare, or do we need to compare that to the cattle?
No, because bison are a migratory species of the plains, and cows were not so migratory. They lived near the forest where they hid and came out to graze at night. That's why baby bisons are born hardier than baby cows. And okay, that's one thing. The other thing, I have been around bison. I have been consulting for people with bison. Believe it or not, in South Florida, they brought them from North Dakota. Of course, it didn't work. But they had this corral designed by Temple Grandin, and every time they would move them through there, some of the bison would die from stress. So with bison, I would move them at least no shorter than every 2 weeks, maybe every month, and still require them to take it all down, but don't move them too frequently because of the stress that we can create on bison.
Okay, we're getting down on time here. Scott, do you have did you want to follow up that thought there, Paul?
I'm sorry, but Ryan, there's a paradigm shift that you incorporated in your farm. We sold off a number ahead, and I think that's a really exciting, I mean, you're having your numbers go up and down, and could you explain some of the rationale behind that? Because possibly this idea of stockpile grazing is really an exciting concept that we should all know about.
So you're asking me specifically? Yeah,
right.
so what Paul's asking, our numbers go up and down on our farm, and yeah, we did. We definitely went down on numbers this spring. That was as much, I'm not gonna lie, it was a market-driven decision, but also knowing the little bit that we've seen, talking with Jaime over the last few years, how powerful stockpile is. So yeah, we've got over half our farm, like stockpiled, couple quarters that we haven't even grazed at all this year. And some of the stuff that we left season long and like grazed here, say even 2 weeks ago, I by no means have this figured out, but what I have seen, I've seen enough to know that I think there's something to what Jaime or what Jim is teaching here. Like that long recovery, something happens in the soil, and I think it gets that ball rolling a lot faster than a lot of other things we could do. So yeah, I don't have anything figured out, and I know you're sitting beside a guy that's got some great cows on his farm there, and I hope they're doing as well at his place as they did at ours.
The single thing that I want you all to remember when I'm no longer here is that increasing long-lived soil organic matter is at the heart of the matter. It's not important if you do agriculture or livestock or not. But if you do not increase long-lived soil organic matter, you're going to be out of business, or your successors. When we increase it, then we produce more every year, and produce more without cost, without inputs. And if you research on it, you will find out that it only produced when we get fat root exudates, and that only happens when we graze or allow grass to grow over mature. That's new knowledge, but now it's on the internet. You can find it on scientific journals. And every masterclass I teach, I put all the links to those places so people can research for themselves. We're going to teach a course on site, and I will go more in depth there on this.
Okay, I think we're getting down on time here. Scott, if you want to have the last question, and then we will think about wrapping it up.
Sure. Jim, I was going to give you a hard time about realizing that bison don't belong in Florida, but you want us to all to plant caraganas that Putin can keep. So maybe we'll all brainstorm a more appropriate hedge for this climate, but that's fine. I kind of wanted to ask Ryan your thoughts. So we've talked about stockpiling a legume, preferably as a means to have that fatty root exudate, and your thoughts on using an annual perhaps as a soft cell as a way into that system to get a lot of the gain and maybe move into a more perennial system. Do you think can you do it with an annual, I guess?
Your question is asking, can you build the soil with the annual to get the perennial system fired up? Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you can. I did it in Florida. When we started, it was 1% organic matter and no mycorrhiza because they used glyphosate every 2 weeks for 23 years because it was a tree nursery with potted trees. So they killed everything. So I had to inoculate the seed with mycorrhiza, and I started with tall legumes, annual legumes, to improve the soil, no-till drill, of course, and then we graze it off with a total graze, and after 3 years of that, it was good enough for perennials, and then we did the perennials, which is the best. The best is perennials. But you need to improve the soil in a succession to be able to support the perennials, or they will die.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. That's been our experience at home, an annual like polycrop. If you want to fire that soil up, that's how you do it. And like in 1 year, you can change a lot of things. And we've had good success having those perennials in that mixture with that annual. So graze the fall graze, late summer fall graze, that annual polycrop. And then the next spring, the perennial grasses and alfalfa, that mixture is off to the races. And that's some of our best pastures. That would be my preferred method, like Jim says, to establish new forage. So
yeah, we have done this on clear-cut timberland, and it worked perfect.
So I think we're getting near the end. That's time, eh, Duncan? We're good to go here. So I guess I would close saying that what we're talking about here has to all fit in as we heard earlier today, within our holistic context. And when I met Jaime down in Florida, that it was kind of what I was really in search of on my Nuffield journey, was how to make things more profitable on our farm, and specifically with the cattle, like the livestock integration portion of the regenerative agriculture. And when I chatted with him and visited with him in person on the farm, like in the field, listening, like it's easy to, we can all come up with the idea of what Jim is trying to convey to us talking, but I think seeing is believing, and that's what happened when I was down on his farm that he was working on down there. So if anybody wants to learn more, that opportunity exists here with Jim tomorrow. He's part of a breakout session, so you can have some one-on-one conversation with him. And we've also are bringing a 2-day seminar specifically to talk about in depth what we've kind of grazed over the very, very surface of here tonight. So on Thursday and Friday out at the Forest Community Center and on our farm, we're going to visit our farm, look at some of the results. I'm hoping that Jim can tell me what we're doing wrong, where the obvious improvements are to be made, but also we can dig a little deeper and I'll try to understand more depth of the total grazing program. So with that, once again, I really thankful for the MFGA to put this conference on. I think it's a great vibe in this room. It's great to see this many people out and the momentum still carrying forward with regenerative agriculture. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Jim. Have a good night.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, and thank you everyone for listening and for asking the questions. I hope it was good.